Trump administration officials are now calling for the nuking of the filibuster after the Republican House of Representatives passed a voter suppression bill called the SAVE Act this week. Now, this bill faces steep odds in the Senate. It needs 60 votes there to pass. Republicans only have 53 senators, and there is no way they are going to get any Democratic support to pass this voter suppression bill. Now, Republicans have framed all of this as a voter ID bill, but it is not that. It is a bill that puts a number of different obstacles in place to suppress typically Democratic constituencies from going to the polls and registering to vote. And the fact that they are considering detonating the filibuster to pass something like this shows you where their priorities are. Now, let's start with this morning where Scott Bessent gave an interview where he very full-throatedly, along with the president's support, called for the nuking of the filibuster in order to get this bill passed. Let's take a look.
Joe, the president couldn't have been more clear. I couldn't have been more clear. A couple months ago, I had an editorial in the Wall Street Journal just saying we got to get rid of the filibuster. And I think the Republicans need to be smart about this. And I think that maybe the filibuster doesn't get withdrawn for everything, but there are things that we've got to do, like voter integrity.
Now, the craziest part of this to me is the fact that Scott Bessent tries to frame this as passing something that's important to the American people. Suppressing valid voters from going to the ballot box is not a priority for the American people. What the American people are caring about right now is the cost of living crisis, and they are worried about their healthcare costs going up, their rent going up, their groceries getting more expensive, and they are particularly worried that the Trump administration doesn't seem to care about any of that and that they are willing to nuke the filibuster to stack the deck in their favor to maintain power. That is what this is about. And so that's just to take us back a little bit. As Republicans describe all of this as a voter ID law, it's not. The simple forms of ID that so many of us could use to go register to vote are not valid in this situation. And we'll talk about that in another clip. But I think for the filibuster, if Republicans break this precedent, one thing they are worried about here is that if they do it, that the next time Democrats are in power, they will do the same thing. And they're terrified of what Democrats could pass if Republicans decide to nuke the filibuster and Democrats no longer have to abide by it. The next time Democrats are in power and hold all the branches of government, they could pass Puerto Rico and DC statehood. They could pass healthcare reform. They could pass voter rights protections. They could pass gun reform. There is so much Democrats could do the next time they're in power if the filibuster doesn't exist. And so that is the risk Republicans are calculating right now. And clearly the fact that they want to do it here means they think the level of suppression they can get from this law is worth the risk. And that's what should worry people. And I want to play this clip kind of going back to the forms of ID people would be able to use if this SAVE Act passed. Zach Nunn, who's a Republican congressman, was talking to Maria Bartiromo this morning, and this is how he described why the voter ID law should be, or why this law as a voter ID law should be so commonsensical to people. Let's take a look.
Look, you got to be 21 years old to drink. You got to be 21 to buy and get a gun. You use a driver's license. We should use a driver's license or a voter ID to make sure when you show up to vote, one of the most important things you can do as an American citizen is taken care of.
Remember what Kamala Harris said about this? She said something like, well, people are going to have to make copies of their documents and just, people don't have Kinkos around. I didn't understand what she was talking about.
Ridiculous. No. And this is their best argument,
right? You need a Kinko's, and they can't make the copies.
That's right.
Oh, my goodness.
So, of course, the propaganda machine is out there trying to make it sound like this is no big deal at all. But guess what? When Zach Nunn is talking about, well, you need a driver's license to buy alcohol or rent a car, guess what isn't a valid form of ID to register to vote? Most people's driver's licenses. There are, there are a small handful of states that have, require real IDs for license. The rest of the country does not. So you could not bring your valid driver's license to register to vote for the first time. Guess what you need? You need a passport, a birth certificate, or naturalization papers. Guess what? Only 48% of Americans have passports. So more than half the country lacks a passport. For birth certificates, people get them, they're paper. People get them, nobody has seen their birth certificate probably since they were born. And so what this comes down to is putting in obstacles, not stopping people from voting, but putting in as many barriers and obstacles as possible where people are intimidated by the process and decide not to do it because they don't know where any of these documents are. And so they just don't bother. And those types of approaches are the things that are directly targeted at Democratic constituencies of voters. And people just don't walk around with their birth certificate, and Republicans know that. So as much as they go out and try to laugh and talk about how crazy it is that people, would talk down about this law, the examples Republicans are using of where voter ID works in other parts of life are not valid through the SAVE Act. It's ridiculous. It's disingenuous and it's bullshit. And there are other real life scenarios about this. Young college students, when they go, let's say you're a college student from Nebraska and you go to school in Pennsylvania and it's an election year and they are registering people to vote on your campus. Guess what? A lot of those students aren't going to be carrying around with them their birth certificate. And so again, these constituency like young voters who generally tend to vote Democratic, this is a direct attempt to prevent those people from registering to vote and voting. Another scenario that has been brought up by Democrats that I think is interesting is about marriage. I want to play this clip of Congresswoman Hillary Scholten from Michigan talking about this scenario just yesterday. Let's take a look.
Nearly 70 million married women in this country have changed their last name, but their birth certificates don't reflect that. In Michigan's 3rd district alone, 160,000 women could find themselves unable to register simply because when they got married, they didn't change both their ID and their birth certificate. 160,000 women in my district alone.
160,000 women in one swing district alone. That is what we are talking about. We are talking about millions of people being impacted by this, tens of millions of people being impacted by this. And you've got Republicans out there trying to dumb it down and tell lies about what this is because they are hoping that people are not going to do the extra research and go one layer below to see how sinister this bill really is. Now, of course, this hasn't stopped the president from jumping in and telling blatant lies and spreading misinformation about this. And another thing for within the SAVE Act is trying to prevent mail-in voting from happening as well. Let's see what our brilliant president's excuse is for why the United States shouldn't have mail-in voting, which was obviously a big reason he lost the 2020 election. Let's take a look.
And you have confirmation U.S. citizenship. That's about a 99% one with Republicans, about 86% with Democrats, except Democrat politicians because they cheat on elections. And then you have no mail-in ballots. And there would be no mail-in ballots, very important. You know, we're the only country in the world that does a system like we do. We're the only country in the world that has mail-in ballots. The way we do this is unbelievable. It guarantees cheating. So it's no.
That is obviously a blatant lie. We are not the only country that does mail-in ballots. There are plenty of sane countries with normal leaders that use mail-in ballots without questioning the outcome of the election, like the UK and Germany and Switzerland and Canada and Australia. Those are all places that have mail-in ballots. So let's debunk that up front. But I think what this comes down to is Republicans know that basic voter ID laws or questioning poll well with the American people across Democrats and Republicans, which I think is people just saying, like, do you need an ID or a license or a student ID or a credit card or something like that to show at your polling place. And that stuff polls well. So they think if they just keep it this really basic, this is a voter ID bill, they know that will poll well. The problem is buried in the details are the classic voter disenfranchisement strategies that we have seen Republicans try to pull off in swing states and red states for decades now. And now they are trying to apply that suppression at a federal level. And it cannot happen. And the fact that they are willing to blow up Senate norms over this is crazy. They're not willing to blow up Senate norms over healthcare, over lowering costs, over prescription drugs, over rent, over groceries. This power grab is what they want to blow up the Senate rules for. And if they do, they better know Democrats are going to make them pay for it. That's it for me today. If you liked what you saw in this video, throw a like on it. Follow the Demwins Media YouTube channel. Follow me at buildingthebench.substack.com, and we will keep bringing you the news as you need to see it. Thanks for watching.